If you are currently leveling up your Django skills with this tutorial, just to let you know, this tutorial is part of a free YouTube playlist, Django Database Structural Testing, where we learn how to set up and utilize Pytest for database structural testing within Django projects. If you like this tutorial and playlist, then also check out our Django Database ORM Mastery course on Udemy. The link to the course and playlist should be found in the video description. In Pytest, markers are used to add metadata to your test function or classes. They allow you to categorize or annotate our tests, which can be really useful for various purposes such as selective test execution or customizing test runs. That's what we're going to be showing you in this tutorial, or potentially integrating with plugins that understand specific markers. Generally, there are two approaches utilizing or implementing markers. We can make an automated type of process using the comptest file, which we will show you shortly, or else you can use markers directly above the test. So an example of that, we would have pytest dot mark and then the name of the mark. So let's just go for model, for example. So we now have this marker which declarates our function, marking it with the model marker. So that's going to be the name of the mark, in this case, model. So when we run Pytest, we can use markers to selectively run tests tagged with specific markers. So let's go ahead now and run Pytest. And now we can use the M switch or M flag and then define the marker related to any test that we want to run. And there we go. So we have one passed test. Don't forget, if you are following along, just to revert your category table if you haven't already done that already, so it exists, and give that a go. That should return one passed test. Right, so let's try that again. But this time we're just going to copy this down, and let's just go for, well, we can keep it the same, but let's just change this to number 2. So we have 2 tests now. One is going to be marked, one isn't marked. Just make sure you change the name of the test. So let's just see this in action to make sure this is working. You can see we have one passed test. If we don't use the M switch, then you can see that we do run 2 tests. So you can see it in action. As you can probably imagine, over time, you might be creating hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of tests. So some types of tests take quite a lot of time to run. And it might not be that you're interested in those types of tests. You just want to check maybe a particular test that you have just created or a set of tests. So utilizing marks will enable us to mark tests, particular types of tests, so that we can select those particular types of tests and only run those type of tests. So we're going to be utilizing the name of test to determine which mark should be applied to the test. And we can have multiple marks per test. So this is why I initially structured or named the function related to the type of test. So what type of test we're running? It's a test for the model. It is a structural test. And we have obviously the name or descriptive name of what type of test we're trying to run. But it's these 2 names potentially that is going to be useful. So what we're going to do now is we're going to automate this process of defining marks per test based upon the name that's provided. Now, what I'm showing you here is obviously just one of many ways you could implement this type of structure. So let's go ahead and just tidy up first. Let's remove the mark. We're going to create that automatically. This is a good time to introduce the comptest file. Before Pytest runs, it is going to look for this comptest file and execute any code within that file before it runs any tests. So the comptest file is considered a special module that can be used to define hooks, fixtures, and plugins for your test suite. So it's a setup code, if you like, for your tests, and it can serve as a central place for organizing and configuring common attributes or common resources that are needed for your tests before your tests run. So what we're going to do inside of our test folder, we're going to create a new comptest file. conftest.py. And what we're going to need to do here is to automate the process of adding marks to tests. Now, when we run Pytest, it's going to look and scan for tests. So what we want to be able to do is to hook into that functionality so that we can modify the collected test items before they are executed. So we're going to do that utilizing the Pytest collected modify items function. So let's go ahead and create a new function, and that's got to be named Pytest. What did I say? Collection modify items, and then pass in the items. So that's going to be the tests that are found or collected. So what we want to do then, so we say for items, remember items are the tests, individual tests. So for item in items, so we're going to loop through each of the tests and we're going to add a mark. So if we, for example, find the name or find a test which has the word model in the function name of the test name, then so item.name, so we're going to specify the name there. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add the marker to it. So add _marker. So pytest.mark.model. Okay, so we're going to need to import Pytest. There we go. So we've just iterated over the tests that are found by Pytest. When we initiate Pytest, we've looked for the name. So that's the function name in this case. And then we've gone ahead and we've added a marker if it makes a match. So in this case, if the word model is in the name of the function, the test, then it's going to add the marker. So let's make a new marker for the structural test or structure. Up to you. So we're going to create a new mark or add a mark to any structure test. Remember, the name of the test must include the word structure, similar to model. So let's go ahead and do that, structure in the name, and then we want to add a new mark called structure. Now let's change that to model structure to make it a little bit more descriptive. Let's go back to the tests. So we have one test at the moment. So I'm just going to copy that down. Let's just return true here. So let's make sure that's named just goes 1. And we'll make a few more too to test this out. So this won't have structure. So at the moment we have 3 tests. 2 of them have model in the name, and only 2 of them have structure. Oh, actually, so I went wrong. So one of them. Okay, so let's go for that. Right, so 2 of them have model and 2 of them have structure. So that's what we are expecting. So let's give this a go. Like we did previously, let's go for Pytest model. So you can see that 2 tests have been run. Okay, so let's try model structure. And you can see that 2 tests again have been run. You can do some further tests, maybe add some of your own markers. If I add structure there, run structure, that should now run 3 tests. So it does look like it's working as intended. Now at this point, when we only have a few tests, that might not seem a very interesting or useful feature, but as we delve deeper into the tests and we want to specifically run certain tests or test types, that's going to be very useful. Now this isn't the only way of selecting tests to run. If you go into the docs folder and then Pytest in commands, here you will find a range of different commands. So you'll be able to run specific tests, run, for example, tests based upon a file or directory, or a name. That's already possible with Pytest. So by using markers, we can group tests and run specific groups of tests. So as a recap, in this tutorial, we've learned about Pytest markers, which are used to add metadata to our test function or classes. So in this tutorial, we've defined markers so that we can select test execution or customize test runs. But alternatively, they can be used if we are using specific plugins that understand specific markers. Through this process, we've learned also how to utilize the conf-test file, the fact that it is a file which Pytest reviews and executes before running any test. And we've utilized this to hook in to the process or the collection process of tests to modify or add functionality. In this case, we've added a function which will add markers automatically to tests as they are collected so that we can use these markers to select specific tests that we want to run.